Hello and welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS NFL Podcast. I'm Katie Mox here with Ryan Wilson and RJ White. Today is our Rookie of the Year betting show. Make sure you keep it locked with us next week for more offseason news. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube page. The chat is already going off. Prediction on how late they will start today. 40 minutes from Captain Spock there. Come on, you guys. Brinson is on vacation. We're only 3 minutes late today. It's not that bad.
Not only that, RJ, they brought the A team.
Yes.
Me and you, I'll be B.A. Baracus. You can be George Papard.
First of all, Wilson, is that a Red Sox jersey or a Red Sox sweatshirt you have on?
No, thanks for asking though. It is a B for the Baldwinsville Bees. That's a local high school. You get suckered into buying all this merch when your kid goes to school there. So that's where I'm at in the process. But
okay, because I was going to be like a Boston Red Sox fan is an interesting choice for you.
Let's see. Right here, this is Fenway Park.
Oh, maybe not
from the 80s. I lived in Boston for a little bit, for 3 years. Mm-hmm. So, and I was a baseball fan growing up, and I loved the Red Sox. This is how old I am. Like, I was a huge Wade Boggs guy. So that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, Fenway Park is one of the first parks I went to. I don't watch baseball now, but that's enough about my baseball viewing habits.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about baseball anymore. RJ, how we doing here? We had you on the show before the draft. You were telling us what the market was dictating. So before we get into some of these awards, how did your bets do? And did the market really dictate how a lot of this went, or were you surprised by the draft?
The bets, the picks on Sportsline did pretty well. But in a long story short, no, I don't think anybody had a good handle on what was going to happen. The market thought, different times, different people were going to be the number 2 pick. Kind of had settled on them passing on a quarterback, the Houston at 2, and they, of course, took the quarterback, traded up to 3 in that bonkers trade, kind of threw everybody's mock drafts in the trash. Then you get to 5, everybody connected Jalen Carter based on the odds to Seattle. They go with Witherspoon, which really nobody, I think, was considering. So it kind of goes a little bit south there, but we did pretty good. In my mock, I had Philly trading up to 7 to get Tyree Wilson, so I projected him at 7. And that's where the Raiders ended up taking him. So that was a nice little 10-1 payout. We had a day 2 picks post come out with some good hits there on certain things to happen, including Hendon Hooker going to the Lions at 10-1. So some good stuff.
Good stuff. Wilson, how were your mock drafts? You did like 50 of them.
Yeah, I think you put them all together. I still probably missed about 8 or 9. I think the final mock draft, I missed on 5 or 6 guys. But the headline for my final mock draft was an absolute grand slam 8-run homer. I had the headline read, let's see. How to start? Anthony Richardson goes top 5. Mm-hmm. Will Levis falls, and the Steelers trade up for an offensive tackle.
Whoa.
I get points for that, right, RJ?
Yeah.
Nailed it. I had what's frustrating is I put together my final mock and then I don't put it out till Thursday. So I react to all the late breaking reports. So I did have the Steelers trading up for a tackle, and then things just worked a little bit differently that I didn't have them trading up. So it seems like when you're trying to get perfect, you undo a lot of the good stuff. And then it just never works out.
100%.
Well, all right, moving on, guys. Let's talk awards for some of these guys that were just drafted. So Offensive Rookie of the Year, Bijan Robinson is the favorite. Running backs often have the clearest path to top-end production in their rookie campaign, followed by the quarterbacks, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. What are you thinking right now, RJ? Who would you place your money on for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, so the last 10 years, it's been 4 running backs, 3 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, kind of an even split, though it hasn't been a running back since Saquon. But you can see why Bijan's the number 1 pick. He's going to, in these, sometimes it's hard to have a favorite going into the season. You get a situation where no running backs go in the first round, and then you're talking Breece Hall versus Kenneth Walker. You get a tight grouping of receivers, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, and you have no good quarterbacks, or quarterbacks that are closely ranked together. So it's hard to find a standout. But Bijan obviously was the guy we was talking about. If positional value wasn't a thing, he might be the number 1 pick in the draft. He's that good. So it's easy to see why he's the favorite. The last 5 have all been top 10 picks. So I think if you're looking for a bet, you have to look in that top 10. But Kamara at 67, Dak at 135 were the 2 before that. So there is a little bit of space to go a little bit off the board. Just speaking to Ryan's pick of Anthony Richardson to go in the top 5, I like his odds here at 9-1. He's the 5th out of these options. I don't think that makes sense to me, especially comparing him to the other 2 quarterbacks. Shane Steichen had success turning Hurts into MVP candidate. Hurts wasn't the starter his rookie year. Richardson can come in and prepare as the starter, get a full workload. Maybe he hits the ground running. His rushing ability is the statistical bonus that's going to give him, that Josh Allen type of elevation to his game. His passing numbers doesn't have to necessarily be as good as some of the other guys because he's going to be good on their rushing front, and he does have an easier schedule. They play the NFC South. He gets to play the Raiders, Pats, and Rams as some of the unique opponents on top of playing, everybody in that bad division twice. And then games against the NFC North will be tough. But I think he does have a pathway to put up some good stats. And at 9-1, it doesn't make sense to me. He should be closer to those other two quarterbacks who are 4-1 and 6.5-1.
Yeah, you go through this list, and I'm just having it sorted now by quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And it's hard to find. I mean, Bijan is the favorite for a reason. He's in a situation where he's going to get the ball a lot. They have a young quarterback. They do have Drake London and Kyle Pitts to help out, but it feels like the offense is going to go through Bijan. And Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have to share carries and snaps with the wide receivers. Jackson Smith and Jigba and Seahawks, it feels like that's going to be a situation where he's going to have to share snaps with Ken Walker II. Not to mention DK and Tyler Lockett. So you just go down the list there. I'm trying to find a sleeper at the running back position, RJ, that might have some value.
I have a couple of good ones. You can give me your thoughts on whether you like either of these guys.
Let me give you one real quick, and then you can tell me. Roshan Johnson's a guy that I love. I don't know where
That's one of mine too, yeah.
Yeah, because I thought he should have gone higher than he did. He ended up going in the 4th round. I liked him in the middle of day 2. And he's an absolute workhorse, low mileage because he played behind Bijan. Who do you have?
That is one for me. I mean, we don't know how good he is because he played behind Bijan. So a lot of these guys get to go be feature backs because they're the best backs on their team. When you're behind Bijan, you're kind of like at the mercy of him, and what you can do. So he might actually be the second best running back in this class. We just don't know. He hasn't had that much time to prove himself as some of these other guys. I think the rushing ability of Justin Fields widens the defense, and Roshan can go up the middle, exploit his size, and probably even get in some space with some safeties and run him over. So I think he could bust some long plays. That'll kind of be the signature highlight reel kind of thing. And he does have a great opportunity to quickly get the running back one workload with Dante Foreman, the guy ahead of him, and Khalil Herbert is more of a complementary piece. So I think the pathway is there at 40-1. I do like him as a sleeper. My other sleeper at the running back position is Devon Achane. Not a lot of competition in the Miami backfield, and he can hit those highlight explosive plays too. Just, that deep speed and can run off. And that Miami passing attack is going to leave a lot of room for running backs to operate. You look at Mostert and Wilson's numbers last year, both were nearly 5 yards per carry. Just because you're not as worried about them, you're worried about stopping those run receivers. So if that carries over, there's going to be a lot of space for Achane if he can get that, lead back carry and lead that backfield. So I kind of like him as the Alvin Kamara, maybe it hits as a day 2 kind of pick kind of guy at 40-1. And then, like you said, Roshan Johnson. My one non-running back sleeper would be Jonathan Mingo at 75-1.
Oh, I was just looking at him. Good. Like it.
Big target for Bryce Young. Love when teams take that receiver with the next pick after the franchise quarterback. We see it a lot. They get their franchise quarterback and they circle back and get the guy they want to be the number 1. Targets are wide open in Carolina. I'm not counting on Adam Thielen to be a number 1 at this point of his career. Not counting on DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall to be that number 1. So if Mingo does have what it takes and is the guy that Carolina thinks he is when they took him as high as they did in that top 40, then I think he has a slight chance to do it. The problem is if he has a huge season, Bryce Young probably does too. And Bryce Young's probably going to win that award. But I do like 75-1 is at least a little interesting to me.
Yeah. Devon Achane, we talked to him at the combine, and I asked him, have you ever, because he has legit track speed. I think he ran 10.1800. I was like, have you ever gotten caught from behind? He goes, I have no idea at any age what it feels like to cop. It's never happened to me in my life. He also at 188 runs between the tackles, so he's not just a bounce it outside and go. And I think that makes him even more interesting in that Mike McDaniel run game where he can run between the tackles or just beat everyone around the corner and see you to the end zone. So I love those guys.
RJ, when do you actually bet these? I mean, we're talking about it today. Are these bets that you're placing today, or do you wait a little bit longer to do these type of awards?
So I think it kind of depends on the guy you want to bet. I think a guy like Richardson is going to be popular, and these odds are going to come down. So you may take him now. These sleepers, I mean, they're really going to have to win the job to jump up in odds. So, and that's not going to happen until camp. So I think there is time to wait. Maybe see if some consensus builds around Bijan. He drops from being 350 to 200 or 250, and there's obviously a balancing of the odds that happen. So if that happens, you might be able to get Achane Roshan at 50-1 instead of 40-1. So that can happen. The thing is, though, if you do get behind news and you do announce that Roshan's the leader for the number 1 role, his odds will drop precipitously, and then you've missed your chance.
Okay, makes sense. Let's look at defensive player of the year now. Will Anderson is the favorite. Oh no, Jalen Carter is the favorite. This is switch. Jalen Carter plus 500. Will Anderson Jr. plus 500. And you got Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, and then Christian Gonzalez. Who are you looking at here for defensive player of the year, RJ?
Yeah, so first it has to be a round one player, and usually a high round one player to have a chance to win. And that's part of that mentality of who's the leader in the club, going into the season in people's minds. It's those high first round picks. 6 of the last 7 have been in the top 12. The other one that hasn't has been not Shaquille Leonard now. Parsons and Lattimore just outside the top 10, but they do qualify for that top 12. There's only been 3 guys since 1988 to go outside of round one. All of them were in the 30s, so high round 2. That Shaquille Leonard, D'Amico Ryans, Kendrell Bell. Though that situation. So if you're looking for sleepers here, you can't go too far. It really has to be in that mold of being in that. Typically, you want to go top 12, but if you really want to go with the sleeper, it's got to be in the first rounds.
What about
What's
Joey
that?
Porter Jr.? You don't think that's a sleeper? I mean, obviously in the second round, but I feel like a lot of draft analysts thought that he would go in the first round, and he has the best odds of anyone from the second round. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and I think he's going to fit well in the Steelers' defense.
That could be an option. 22 to 1's a little bit too. I think there's still value in his name built into that, and he's a little overvalued. I would expect that number to be a little bit less to get value in the second round to go with him. My top pick is going to be Devin Witherspoon. Just he's at 10 to 1, and its history's against him. We've never had defensive backs win this in back-to-back years. It feels like one wins it, and then the people get tired of voting for them, and they go find the pass rusher to vote for, or the high tackles linebacker. So, but he is a top 5 pick. He should have shorter odds than Gonzalez, who's at 10 to 1, and Lucas Van Ness, who are outside that top 5 and actually outside the top 12 that I referenced earlier. So 10 to 1 just seems to me like you're not pricing him correctly based on the history of this award. If he's good too, QBs can't avoid him. A lot of times people draft a cornerback in these terrible secondaries, and then if they're good, you can go away from them. But he's got Tariq Woolen on the other side. Great year last year. I think that alleviates some of that concern. So I think guys like maybe Tyree Wilson, I think is plus 650. They have a better chance of winning the award just overall. I just like the value with Witherspoon better. I think he should be in that grouping near the top.
Yeah, the concern with Wilson is also the foot. We don't know where they are with that foot. That's what scared some teams off. Obviously, the Raiders weren't scared off. A name that I like Joey Porter Jr. does make some sense. He didn't have the ball production at Penn State, and that's part of the reason he slipped. But the guy I like is 2 names above him if you're watching on YouTube. Emmanuel Forbes, 14 interceptions, 3 years, 6 pick sixes. And of all the things that translate from one level to the next, whether it's high school to college NFL, it's creating turnovers. And if Emmanuel Forbes, and I would imagine he'll get targeted early on until folks figure out whether he's good or not, he'll have those opportunities. He only weighs 166, but he's 6'1", and he doesn't play like he's 166. I love Devin Witherspoon. I think RJ's point's a good one. There's Tariq Woolen on the other side, so pick your poison. But I think Emmanuel Forbes has an opportunity to get some picks early before people sort of catch on to him and see if he's legit or not, and then he can be off and running. But I like him. I don't know if that number plus 1,500 is appeasing or not to you, RJ, but I like it a lot better than the Joey Porter Jr. number and even the Tay Banks number right below it.
Yeah, I like it better than Porter number. I still think it's a little too close. He's behind that. It's. I think I would want him to be a little bit more long shot. There's a guy that was drafted ahead of him, a defensive guy who's 40 to 1. That would be my sleeper to go with, and that's Will McDonald. Not a lot of buzz with him because he wasn't expected to be drafted that high, and it's hard to find value at defensive rookie of the year with how often those round 1 picks hit. But at 40 to 1, he's not being treated like a top 15 pick in the odds. 7 other players are at 40 to 1. Only one of them was a round 1 pick, and that was Brian Brisset at 29. Doesn't really qualify for like the guy you would think of to win this award. So really just being completely dismissed in these odds. And they drafted him over O-line help, and they didn't do that to not use him. And elite defenses like the Jets are going to give him opportunities to get at quarterback, because it's not like you can just focus on stopping him with people there. So I think there's a world where, since there's not a huge standout pass rusher, questions on whether Will Anderson is going to put up big sack numbers in the league, Tyree Wilson's health, like Ryan brought up, that Will McDonald could be the guy to get to 10 sacks first and maybe be the guy that wins that award as a 40 to 1. And we know he's going to get the national attention being a New York Jet.
Hey, RJ, let me ask you this, and I'm notorious for asking questions that people don't readily have the answers to, but do you remember off the top of your head what Aiden Hutchinson's defense rookie of the year odds were?
I don't, but it was very high. He might have even been the favorite to start because people thought that was a reach. The Trayvon Walker pick was a reach and they liked him better. But even if he wasn't the favorite when we closed, he was up there definitely.
And that's where I'm coming on Will Anderson. Like, I think that's going to be that type of production, like 8 or 9 sacks, a couple of strip sacks. And then the question becomes, can someone beat that at some other position? What are the Will Anderson odds? I wasn't looking when they were up.
He's a co-favorite at 5 to 1.
Okay.
So you're talking about who can beat that. And there's one guy that fits the parameter of being not quite a round 1 pick, but in that top 40. And not a guy I think we talk a ton about in the pre-draft process. And that's Derek Hall. 60 to 1 went to Seattle. fits the parameters, being a top 40 pick at number 37, going to a team where edge rush was needed. He's a power rusher. I'm sure you could break him down a lot better as a prospect than I can, but what I've read about him, power rusher, can exploit some of the weaker offensive tackle talent that's in the NFC West. We know offensive tackle been an issue for Arizona, Los Angeles, and he can put up some sacks, I think. And so in that class of edge rushers, if 8 or 9 is where like the favorite is getting to, he might be the one that gets to 10-2 and just out of a little bit out of nowhere and start to build up some backing to win this award, especially if Seattle is in the hunt for a playoff spot, and they are right now, I think 6th in the make the playoffs odds in the NFC. So they're expected to be a playoff team, and he could be a part of that. And people might start talking about him if he starts piling up sacks against some of these bad tackles.
Yeah, Derek Hall, he's got a little twitch to him. He was fun to watch coming off the edge. It'll be interesting to see how he gets used and how often he gets used early on in Seattle.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. You're watching the Pick Six podcast, and we'll be right back.
Phenomenal! Absolutely magisterial here! Artilharia do Campeonato Brasileiro! Golpista agora! Golaço!
Welcome back to Pick Six. Follow us here at Pick Six Pod across all social media platforms. And we are talking offensive and defensive rookies of the year. I feel like you guys have already touched on this, but that's our next point here is talk about some of these long shots for the award. Anybody else that you would hit on?
Well, the reason I like guys like Derek Hall and fits that mold of the top 40 pick is if you saw on those odds boards, you get guys like Jervon Dexter and the Quan Martin, these guys a little bit above him. And it just doesn't really make sense to back one of those guys, especially when they don't profile as what voters are looking for in this award. They go into a season with expectation. I really think you have to hit that top 40 pick. So when you're looking for your value, even if there's a sleeper in the draft that you kind of like, especially on the defensive side, you just got to know that if he didn't go in the top 40, he's probably not going to be in the race for this award because nobody that hasn't been a top 40 pick has won the award since 1988.
Yeah, I'm looking down the list here. I don't want to go like crazy deep, but Nolan Smith, I saw his name earlier. Situational pass rusher, maybe for Philadelphia, can have like an Alton Smith type impact. I think Alton had double-digit sacks his first year.
Smith.
Yeah, so I mean, just something like that. I'm looking here, like Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC is another fun guy that I really like watching. About 266 coming out of USC. Where he ends up playing, there he is right there, plus 5,000 for the Chargers. The Chargers who historically struggled with finding defensive line help. They obviously have edge help, but maybe if there's an opportunity for him to win because Bosa / Mack are getting more attention, that could be a door to perhaps a few more sacks than people expected. But it's just so hard to. The problem is you watch these guys play in college and they dominate, and they come to the NFL and there's an adjustment period and they struggle. Typically they battle some soft tissue injuries, whether it's a hamstring or whatever, calves, and then they don't play a lot. So you're betting on everything going perfectly, and the reality is it's usually far from that. And that's why RJ can tell you better than me. It's a lot hard. It's incredibly difficult to figure out what's what.
Yeah, I think one of another decent long shot to play is Jack Campbell. I think a lot of people thought he was a reach going to Detroit at 18, but he still does fit that, high first round pick mold that people will be thinking about him. And the fact that they didn't do as much to address the pass rush means there are probably going to be tackle opportunities for Jack Campbell. If he comes in and he is playing, every down as we expect, he's going to have a chance at a lot of tackles. So even if he doesn't have the Luke Kuechly type of profile to his game, like if he puts up Luke Kuechly type of stats, people are going to start looking at him if he's piling up 10 tackles a game and 9 tackles a game. And there's no other like breakout 12 to 14 sack guy. There's no 5 to 6 interception guy. Maybe it goes to the guy that's generating a lot of tackles for a team that people think are going to win the division for the first time in probably forever.
No, that's a good call. They have some fat guys in the middle. They have Aleem McNeil from NC State. They drafted Broderick Martin, a really good player at West Kentucky. So that's going to take some of the pressure off the offensive lineman getting to the second level and allow Jack Campbell, who's tested through the roof and plays pretty fast too, to do his thing. That's a good call.
All right, let's move on to more.
Oh, well, I was going to say, somebody asked about Dalton Kincaid. Do we like Dalton Kincaid? And my issue with tight ends is they just don't perform well in year one typically. So it's really hard. I mean, if Kyle Pitts couldn't get into that race, he was the sleeper that I liked a few years ago to be in that race, and he just complete non-factor. So if he couldn't do it, I don't know that Dalton Kincaid in an offense with a lot of targets is going to do it. So I think the odds for a guy like Kincaid just don't give us any value. But it is interesting to see him down at 25-1 when guys like Rashee Rice or 22-1. I think Rashee Rice is kind of the surprising name on that board, being at 22-1, I guess, just for the factor that he is a Kansas City Chief and he has the same odds as Zay Flowers, who went in the first round. He's over Quentin Johnson, who went in the first round. So, Ryan, what do you think about Rashee Rice? Does he actually have the ability to come in and be a factor in this race?
If he does, hats off to him. I don't get it watching him play. He timed pretty well. I think he ran a 4.51. He plays a lot slower than that. And physically, he's the replacement for Juju Smith-Schuster, but Juju played inside. Rashee plays a lot of outside. So I don't know what their plans are for him, and I would be shocked if he puts up better than Juju Smith-Schuster numbers in year one. Now, look, I could be wrong, and obviously the evaluators in Kansas City know a lot more than I do for a lot of reasons, but based on what I saw, and I know Rick Spielman felt the same way I did, it just wasn't there on tape. The thing about Dalton Kincaid that I mentioned, and you mentioned some other players that had better odds, and who else did you say had better odds?
Dalton Kincaid, 22-1, Zay Flowers. I mean, he's at the same level as Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison,
Right.
16-1, Rashee
Gotcha.
Rice, 22-1. So,
and here's the thing about Dalton Kincaid, and you know this better than I do. He's on a team that has 5 or 6 guys that can be targeted on every single snap. So you're talking about Steph Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, James Cook, and then you got to share the football, and that complicates matters when you're trying to rack up yardage and score touchdowns and make your case for rookie of the year or offensive player of the year, whatever it is you're going for.
yeah, the one other guy I want to ask you about was Josh Downs, being in that Indy, going with Anthony Richardson has kind of the same factor to the Jonathan Mingo pick of maybe it draws away from him if that offense is doing well, then the quarterback gets it. But Josh Downs, I think, could come in and be like the reliable target for him right away, maybe more so than Michael Pittman being more the big play threat. So if Josh Downs, is he the type of player that can come and put up a big catch total and factor into this race if he can find the end zone enough? I know with those type of players, you just don't know if they're going to score 2 touchdowns or 10 touchdowns. So
here's the thing. He was
say the touchdowns go. Yeah. And
he was Sam Howell's favorite target, and he was Drake May's favorite target. So he can play with big time quarterbacks and finds ways to get open. UNC's offense is a little quirky. I think he's better than Mecole Hardman, who he's sort of replacing. He's an upgrade, he's a little more polished as a route runner, a little more dynamic, even if he didn't test quite as well. So I like that. It's just a matter of can Anthony Richardson consistently get him the ball, or if Gardner Minshew's your guy for the first month and a half of the season, whatever, can he do it? I feel better about that. But I like the pick, and I think it's a good fit. And maybe, as you mentioned, Pittman rediscovers this game. They have Alec Pierce. So they have some pieces there, but I think he has that's a long shot that I actually would be intrigued by.
And do you have any value at all on your guy, Darnell Washington, Steelers guy? I know he's not a statistical threat as those guys, but I mean, he is buried on these odds. He's 100-1, the last name on this list, with Cameron Latu, Tucker Kraft, Trey Tucker. So behind guys like Luke Schoonmaker, Michael Wilson, Jonathan Mingo, we talked about before. So I don't know. Does he factor in at all in this race?
I think those odds check out. There were some concerns about his knee. That's why he fell. And then you have Pat Freiermuth in front of him. So those are two things that are against him. And look, they may have drafted him in the 3rd round just to be a blocker. Let's be real, which he is really good at. He's not quite developed as a receiver. In fact, he wasn't even the best tight end on that Georgia team. But I would be shocked, and I mean shocked in the same way I'd be shocked if I woke up tomorrow and had an afro if Darnell Washington was rookie of the year.
Yeah, I just know that the conversation with him is he dropped and people were surprised. And he's one of the big reason why people thought Steelers had one of the best classes. So
yeah,
I know people are going to see that name and be like, maybe that's a guy I should play. But I'm against tight ends in general. And I'm kind of on your level that 100-1 still isn't worth it to me. It's got to be longer than that.
And he dropped because
against tight ends in general.
As rookies, because they just don't produce as rookies. So, I mean, they can come and the ones that do, I mean, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, these are guys aren't the guys that you would have bet to win rookie of the year, when they come out, because they're just not high picks anyway. So if you do want to look at a tight end and just go crazy, maybe you look at a guy like Luke Musgrave at 75-1 or Schoonmaker at 75-1 and just bypass the Dalton Kincaids of the world.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about more futures, division winners, who's going to make and miss the playoffs, win totals. RJ, what is the market dictating right now in terms of who you should jump on for team win totals or division winners?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, we talk about division winners every year, and you always get those ones that emerge as like minus 280 favorites and minus 320 that are going to win the division, but you're just not value to play, the Bills and the Chiefs of the world, those type of things. That just isn't happening right now. Maybe it will happen as people bet on these and the odds skew. There's only 3 teams with minus odds to win the division right now. The biggest favorite is not the Chiefs or the Bills. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars at minus 160, which if you would have said, who's the team most likely to win the division, Jacksonville Jaguars, I think everybody would kind of scoff at that. So that's interesting. But because the current market is like that, expecting a lot of wide open races. I think there is value to be had on a lot of the favorites right now if you like them. Bills at plus 135, I think that has a little value. Bengals at plus 120, I think has some value. I think people are expecting more from Baltimore than they showed last year. Philly is plus 105. You would expect them to be, with how they perform, to be minus odds by the time we get to August. And then even teams like the Chiefs and the 49ers, both around minus 150. I think those get bet up too. So if you like any of those teams, I think now is a smart time to bet them, because it's probably not going to get any cheaper than that.
Man, so I'm looking at, I don't want to disrespect Katie, but those Eugene Cyril Smith at third odds, plus 250. I don't hate that. Now, the concern is, can Gino do it in back-to-back years? But this team, I think on paper, is better than they were at the end of last season. And I like that. And it feels like there's some reasons for optimism. I thought they had a really good draft. And
now, are you saying this because we don't know who the quarterback's going to be with San Francisco? Or are you saying this just because Seattle you think is a better team than the Niners?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about the quarterback situation in San Francisco, but I mean, that's obviously a good point. But I'm just thinking about a year away from Russ Wilson leaving, and any doubts that remained, and those doubts seem to go away pretty quickly. Those are a long gone afterthought at this point. And it feels like Pete Carroll and John Schneider, the coach and GM, that team is buying in, and they're supported Gino. They didn't draft a quarterback, all the things to sort of tell the quarterback, this is your team going forward. And I think the defense is going to be a lot better. What do you think about that, RJ?
Yeah, a lot of premium picks in the draft too, so you can get better right away through the draft with Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Derek Hall and guys like that. They were actually on my list. I have 5 dogs I like that I wouldn't play now. I think the favorite's going to get pricier. Dogs are going to add some value. So maybe 260 might not be the best price you can get on Seattle throughout the process. But Seattle is one team I was looking at for the reasons you gave. They're a team on the rise. Who knows how that San Francisco quarterback situation plays out, like Katie's saying. So I do think Seattle does have value. I don't think the gap between those two teams is as big as that the minus 155 to plus 260 speaks to. And a lot of that is, I know the quarterback situation went very wrong for San Francisco last year with all the backups having to fill in. Everything else went pretty right, and they didn't have much else go wrong. And then you get a little bit of the coaching drain, who I know next guy up for the San Francisco defensive thing just seems to be the case in their coaching ability to generate good coaches there. But who knows, if the next guy can be as successful as some of the other ones. So we'll see. I just think that they're a little bit overvalued in the market right now. And I'm with Ryan that Seattle is undervalued, but they might be a little bit more undervalued. So they were one of my 5 picks of dogs I'm looking at right now, but I think I might be able to get better prices at a little down the road.
But RJ, don't you think that we might get better prices on the 49ers a little bit down the road? Historically, they start pretty slow. The first half of the season, that's when they lose kind of a chunk of their games. Plus, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Is it Trey Young? Is Brock Purdy going to be available? So let's say they lose a couple games out there in the beginning. You probably could get better odds with San Francisco if you wait until the season starts.
If you're talking about in-season betting, then maybe. We still don't know what the schedule is going to look like. That's coming out next week. So I think that'll dictate a lot of that. Who are they playing early in the season? If they have to go at Seattle in one of their first couple games, maybe Seattle gets a jump on them, and you're going to get better value with San Francisco at that point. So we'll see how the schedule looks like there, and you're correct. But if guys get cleared, if Purdy's ahead of the game, maybe people bet them up, and they go up to that minus 200 range where some of these, we see these very, very good teams, kind of laying in that minus 200 or better range. So I think a lot is the jury is kind of still out on that. I just think they fit that. The favorites in these divisions are going to go up just because we see the favorites typically tend to be higher favorites than they are now. And so if you want to get value on some of these teams, I don't think that value is going to be there in August.
Katie, can I point out that you don't like Trey Lance so much? You called him Trey Young.
Trey Young.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Trey Lance. Trey Young. Wow, mixing up the names here. Yeah. Look, it's not that I don't like Trey Lance. He hasn't shown me anything to say that he's the guy. Purdy has shown, he's won more than any other rookie, and he did so great, and he beat Tom Brady, and the offense opened up with him more than Jimmy Garoppolo. I haven't seen any yet from Trey, and maybe we will this year, but how could you, Ryan Wilson and RJ White, how could you say we want Trey Lance to start over Brock Purdy when you saw what Brock Purdy did?
I don't know if you necessarily want to say that. The only thing that's stopping Brock Purdy is that his elbow is still in 2 pieces. And I think if he were healthy, I think you're rolling him out there, not thinking twice about it. One of the few things that is, quote unquote, saving Shanahan and Lynch from having to answer all these questions about why and guys named they traded from 12 to 3 a few years ago to trade Lance. That they're winning and they were very close to the Super Bowl, and they've been really good. But it is curious to me that they don't really have an idea about how the quarterback position works, and they're still as good as they are. But hey, as long as you're winning, no one cares, and I think that's sort of the takeaway.
Yeah, the thing I'll say about Trey Lance is that his little bit that he has gotten to play didn't come with Christian McCaffrey, and that's a very easy way to have a good quarterback play is have a guy that talented on your offense. So Brock Purdy gets a little advantage to that. But also long term, they had a plan in place when they trade 3 first-round picks to go get Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan has an idea of what his offense looks like with Trey Lance, and I think that offense in his mind has a higher ceiling than what Brock Purdy showed, where the defense was winning a lot of those games, and Brock Purdy was playing well. I'm not going to take anything away from him. There's a reason he was the Mr. Irrelevant, though. He wasn't expected to be this good, and his mid-range, his median outcome probably isn't as good as he looked last year. So maybe there's some things that help the schedule, the surrounding cast, that he isn't necessarily a top 5 quarterback in this league. But Trey Lance in the system that I think that Kyle Shanahan had in mind for him when they decided to spend 3 first-round picks on him could be a top 5 quarterback if it all comes together. Injuries might have already derailed that, so who knows?
Well, Wilson, I want to ask you, though, about the draft, because I do think that there was like a little bit of a Brock Purdy effect. A lot of teams were drafting quarterbacks later in the rounds. Was that surprising to you?
Mercy. A lot of guys went that I didn't think were going to go as high as they did. And at the top of that list is not Stetson Bennett, who I get. I mean, if you're the Shanahans or the Sean McVays of the world and you're drafting quarterback, you get the benefit of the doubt. But Sean Clifford went way higher than I thought. I think he ended up going in round 5. Let me double check here. Sean Clifford went in the middle of round 5 to the Packers. Like that, I don't get. Whatever, we'll see how it works out. I do want to point out, though, Debo made this note to me last week. I do these way too early mock drafts. So going into Brock Purdy's junior year, I think that was 2021, I had him going in the first round.
Whoa.
And he had a really good next to last year at Iowa State. His last year at Iowa State, he tried to do too much. And to RJ's point, played himself out of getting drafted almost altogether. He was the very last player taken. But there's tape of him out there being really good. And there were conversations like he was on people's lists. But he just, and I think he admitted that, he didn't have much around him. He was trying to do all the heavy lifting and it sort of blew up in his face. But looking at this draft class, top 5 guys we all knew about. It was just the order in which they went. Jake Hayner was the next quarterback off the board. He went in the round 4. That's not necessarily unexpected, but once you get past Hendon Hooker, the expectations that these guys are going to be backups. And in terms of athletes in the Brock Purdy sense, Stetson Bennett fits that bill. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is more Trey Lance than Brock Purdy in terms of his athleticism, and he has a better arm than Purdy too. Sean Clifford sort of fits that bill. Jaron Hall out of BYU went to the Vikings. He went late in round 5. I liked him, his tape a lot. He fits that athletic build, as is Max Duggan, the last quarterback drafted out of TCU. Tanner McKee went to the Eagles. That was probably one of the weirdest picks in the draft because he's 6'6", and he probably would lose a foot race to me and RJ. Like he is slow. Like I don't know how he fits that offense and what they want to do. But there was what felt like to some degree a Brock Purdy effect in that you're taking flyers on guys. You need guys to run the scout team. You need guys to be backups in case, as 49ers will tell you, in case someone gets hurt. You don't want to be rolling guys out there that on their 12th team or whatever, and you want to have a plan. But I got it. I think 15 total quarterback split. I think that was the number, which was, I don't know how recently that's happened, but that feels pretty rare.
Well, I think it was a record from what I understood.
That is indeed rare.
as many quarterbacks taken. Yeah. On the Brock Purdy front, finding the next Brock Purdy, it was so frustrating hearing that throughout the draft. Like, who's this guy? Oh. The Brock Purdy effect. It's like if you draft him, you better draft Kyle Shanahan next, because that's the reason why Brock Purdy is as good as he was. So if you're just taking a guy and you're the Vikings and you don't have Kyle Shanahan, and you expect the guy you take to be Brock Purdy, it's just not going to happen. You better have a plan in place and a way to maximize him. But I want to go to Tanner McKee. You said he's big, but he's slow. I wonder if, the Eagles with the butt push play, and then they get guys first downs, and maybe you save a little wear and tear on Jalen Hurts by getting a huge guy that can just fall forward.
Crash test dummy.
The butt push guy. So how are Tanner McKee's hands? Is he a fumble worry, or maybe they give him that very limited role of just going and getting out first downs and touchdowns and being that big butt push guy and take a little bit of wear and tear out of Jalen Hurts. So he doesn't because the Chiefs did that too with Patrick Mahomes. He fell forward and he hurt his leg or his knee or his foot that that 1 year. And I worry about that with Jalen Hurts. Don't let him get exposed to those hits. Go and throw a tall Tanner McKee type. Just go and fall forward if you need it.
Stanford crash test dummy. You don't see that a lot, but hey.
Billy, RJ's an Eagles fan now.
So circling back to other division winner underdogs, I like Atlanta at plus 380. The moves this offseason tell you they believe they'll contend. They finished last year with 7.9 Pythagorean wins. When we talk about Pythagorean wins, all that means is that it's built upon what their points scored and points against tell you. So a team like the Vikings, who had a negative point differential, are going to do very bad in that category, even though they went 13-4. Well, Atlanta was 7.9 Pythagorean wins. New Orleans led the division with 8. So it was really tightly packed bunch. And Atlanta, I think, was better last year than probably given credit for. I mean, all those teams were right around. They're all bad, but they were all right around each other. So plus 380 seems like we're reading a little bit too much into how good the Saints might be. I think Atlanta thinks they're better than the market is telling you at plus 380. So I like them. Ryan, you have any thoughts about Atlanta?
It's a fair point. And 2 years ago, I think they won all their games by a total of like 4 points. It felt like every game was a close game. Last year felt like they were a little better. They got the quarterback situation they hope resolved in Desmond Ridder. But as I talked about earlier, that's why you draft Bijan Robinson, take the pressure off Ridder, who coming out of Cincinnati struggled with accuracy. And that's in large part why he fell to the third round. And you have Kyle Pitts, you have Drake London, you have Tyler Algiers. The pieces are in place to be a competitive football team in a not great division. And it's just a matter of Desmond Ridder being that guy. And if he is, I like this a lot. I think this makes a ton of sense. The defense is going to be much improved. They did a lot of things in the offseason to get better defensively. And once again, you're going up against Baker, Bryce Young, rookie, and then Derek Carr, who shrinks in big moments. So the opportunity is certainly there much more than it would be if you're in the AFC or NFC West.
In a Derek Carr in unfamiliar surroundings for the first time in his career, where we don't know how he reacts to that. So the third team I like out of my 5 is Miami at plus 320. They were a playoff team and they cycled quarterbacks all year. They never seemed like had any consistency at quarterback because they never knew who was going to be healthy and playing. And they still made the playoffs. So obviously keeping Tua healthy is paramount. But I think one of the biggest moves of the offseason that nobody's treating is one of the biggest moves of the offseason. And this is because I'm a very big coaching matters proponent, was adding Vic Fangio. That defense has been an underperforming defense for a long time and just being lucky and making it work off of takeaways. But they're always a typically pretty poor rated unit. And Vic Fangio just isn't going to let that fly. He's going to come in. He's going to know how to work with some of these guys. And I think he's going to elevate what that defense does. We know the offense is going to be good with, the brilliant mind of Mike McDaniel. They got up coordinating that. So I think you put those two together. I like them better than the Jets, I think. And all the Aaron Rodgers love has boosted the Jets odds over them. I think the Jets might be plus 200, while the Bills are like plus 135 or whatever I said earlier. But I would give Miami a better chance at those odds of sneaking in and giving the Bills a fight than the Jets.
You say you have 2 other teams?
2 other, yeah.
I'm going to give you a team. Hopefully it's not your team. If it is, you can just piggyback off of that. I mean, if Justin Fields hits and everything they've done on that team to get better over the last 5, 6, 7 months, whatever, no Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Expectations in Detroit are the highest that they've been in decades. And I do like Detroit a lot. But what are the Chicago odds?
So interesting. They butt up against another team I like, which is going to be my next team. And that's Green Bay at plus 400. Just because Chicago was the worst team in the league last year. They had the number 1 pick. They didn't pick first, but they had the number 1 pick. And I know that they've gotten better and they made moves to get better, getting DJ Moore, all those things that you've said. Defense probably isn't going to be as bad, but a leap up from the worst team in the league to division winner is tough. Jacksonville did it, so maybe they can do it in what should be a competitive division. I just think Green Bay, Rodgers wasn't that good last year. And I know that that's not the guy that the Jets are trading for with that trade they made. They would expect him to be the guy of a couple of years ago. But I just think that maybe Jordan Love is as good as Aaron Rodgers was last year. We don't know. The range of outcomes for Jordan Love is wide. He could
hold
be
on
a top
1 second.
guy.
RJ White at CBSI.com.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just he's a complete unknown, and he looked better in the limited playing time he got last year than he did earlier. And the division's wide open, and he could be a top 5 quarterback. He could be the Josh Rosen. We just don't know with him. And
that's so disrespectful.
Well, I mean, Josh Rosen isn't in the league right now. He isn't playing football games right now. So,
True.
I just think what when you put Green Bay as plus 400 well behind Chicago in this race, you are calling him that type of quarterback. You are saying he has already busted and they are going to need to do something at quarterback. And I just don't know that that's the case right now. So I would bet on the optimistic side of him, and maybe they can get in that race, as Ryan was making the case about the other teams in the division. I think it's a wide open race. So going with the last place team here, who I don't know, they've had a history of success. They might not be replacing a quarterback that's as good as we think, just because of the body of work of Aaron Rodgers. We know he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I just didn't see that guy last year, and I think there's a possibility that Jordan Love can be close to that, and they can be competitive in this race.
And look, they've gone out and tried to help him in the draft. They got two tight ends. I think they got Lucas Van Ness in the first round, the edge rusher, but they're putting pieces around Jordan Love to give him success. And I think you're right. I think Aaron Rodgers wasn't great last year. I think Jordan Love, we'll get to see for the first time in a long time what it looks like when a first round quarterback sits for a little bit. Because the last time that happened was maybe Phillip Rivers, I'm trying to think, for that length of time. And that was 2004. Then Aaron Rodgers came 2005. So that around that era. And who knows? Maybe it'll work out. I think for the Bears to have a real chance, it all comes down to Justin Fields balling out. And if he struggles early on, if the offensive line isn't what we think it is, the defense gives up 35 points a game, all that stuff goes out the window.
And maybe the coaching has a plan in place to maximize that offense and do some different things with Justin Fields. Don't rule out that they could be a Shane Steichen level team. And maybe, I don't know about Kyle Shanahan. You're not going to compare people to that type of level, but maybe there's a hidden gear there where they come out with an offense that goes, whoa, we didn't expect anything like this.
And your guy, Rashawn Johnson, being a part of it.
Exactly. So the ability is there. It just didn't make sense for me with how successful the Green Bay franchise has been, and just Jordan Love being an unknown to put them behind the Bears, who were the worst team last year.
That's a good point.
And then I got one more super long shot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One more super long shot. We're going way down the board here with Houston at plus 900. So this is the division that Jacksonville, the juggernaut, is expected to win at minus 160, the biggest odds of anyone. It could be more up in the air. I mean, D'Amico Ryans is going to make that defense better. The defense has been very bad. And he's going to come and he's going to make that defense better just on his own, regardless of the talent. CJ Stroud, big quarterback upgrade to me, and seemed like a pro-ready type of quarterback, then come in and have success in his first year. Good offensive line in front of him. The offensive line is the one thing that hasn't been an issue, and they have actually made some upgrades in the interior in that front too. So if Jacksonville does regress some, and we know that progression isn't a linear thing, you don't go from 2 wins to 9 wins to 13 wins, and now you're super competitive unless you're the Bengals and you have Joe Burrow. So these teams can be a little bit shaky. Maybe Jacksonville has a 7-10 type of year, and then there's space for one of these teams with these rookie quarterbacks to jump up. And I'm saying with D'Amico Ryans, if he really is an A+ coach, that could be the team. So plus 900, I think, is a pretty good value for that.
Yep, I like it.
I like it too. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. When we get back, which 5 underdog bets should you wait to bet? RJ has those answers. You're watching Pick Six. We'll be right back.
It's gonna be you.
Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
We should go to the Super Bowl.
I'm in.
Inspired by a true story.
I'm taking this one. It's cute.
One trip
Come on, ladies.
can change your life.
I'm at a party with a bunch of kids.
I'm 36. I'm a man.
You're working on it.
Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Rita Moreno, and Sally Field.
This has been the best weekend of my whole life.
Why is champagne such a violent beverage?
80 for Brady. Rated PG-13. Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back to the Pick Six podcast. I'm Katie Mox here with Ryan Wilson and RJ White. Today is our Rookie of the Year betting show. All right, RJ, keep it going here. Who are 5 bets or 5 teams that we should wait to bet?
Right. So I think all those teams that we went over have value now, but I do think they're going to have more value because I think the value is going to go up on those favorites. So those would be the 5 to wait on. If you're ready, I want to go on to a few other different futures markets that I think have a little bit of value that we can talk about here, starting with make and miss the playoffs. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So the AFC is stacked. 6 teams are at minus 150 or higher. Miami's the 7th at minus 115. Everybody knows how stacked the AFC is. And I don't think there's much value trying to back a surprise team, but I don't hate New England at plus 250 to make the playoffs. For me, it's a coaching upgrade. It's Mac Jones, Ryan's guy, Ryan's BFF, did not have a chance with that offensive staff they put in place. And now he does with Bill O'Brien, who has gotten the most out of Deshaun Watson in the past, is a much better offensive mind. So I think he can come in and gel well with Mac Jones and really create an offense that speaks to his strengths, because in his rookie year, he did show some strengths. He was very good downfield. He was efficient downfield. And if Bill Belichick works his magic with the defense, I think they could be competitive. So I don't hate New England sneaking in as the 6 or 7 seed at a plus 250. What do you think about that, Ryan?
No, and look, they work together, Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones at Alabama. They have a rapport. They're both type A, hard ass types that don't put up with a lot of nonsense. We saw the reports over the early in the offseason that Mac Jones was on Bill Belichick's doo-doo list because he went outside the family to try to figure out what was going on with why in God's green earth would a defensive coordinator call plays for the offense. That ship has sailed, and I think the defense is going to be better. They got Christian Gonzalez. They drafted it. They got Marty Mapu, who I loved out of Sacramento State. He's probably a safety moving the linebacker in much the same way Kyle Duggar did. And I mentioned that because they got bigger at the second and third levels, which they had a lot of small guys out there, sub 6 feet. So they'll be better defensively, and they're going to need to be in that division. And then if Mac can have an opportunity to make plays down the field, I think it was Raheem Morris who said it. Maybe it was another. I'm trying to think of the defense. Whatever the defense coordinator was, he said it looked like a defensive coordinator was calling plays for the offense when he watched the film, and he wasn't being funny. He was like, "Oh, this guy's incredibly conservative. It's not helping this team." And Matt Patricia. So I think this is a real chance, especially if the Bills and the Jets and the Dolphins are sort of punching each other in the face and hurting each other in much the same way we've seen the Steelers and the Bengals and the Ravens do that over the years, and allow the team no one's paying attention to make a little headway in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm not going to rule out Bill Belichick getting one over and out coaching some of these AFC East teams. I've seen it for too long as a Bills fan. Also, as a Bills fan, maybe you can get some insight as why Christian Gonzalez was available a little bit later than everybody expected. As a Bills fan, I had mocked him to 14 at the Patriots at one point, and I was like, please don't let that happen. And then finally, in my final mock, I didn't have him falling that far. So when he was available at 14, I was like, oh my God, they did it again. Then they traded down, and I'm like, oh, thank God they're not going to get Christian Gonzalez. And then they get him anyway. So I just don't know why he fell. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, he was a top 10 guy. I heard he was going to go pretty early. He was my cornerback one, just ahead of Devin Witherspoon. And what I had heard is that some teams question his toughness. And by that, I don't mean he's not willing to tackle, but just in conversations, and this is what happens during the pre-draft process. You bring the player in, or you talk to him at the combine or wherever, and you ask him questions. And if you don't like the answer, that can sometimes sort of taint your view of them as a football player. On the field, he was lights out. He got a ton better coming from Colorado to Oregon, showed ball skills. His sisters are track stars. I think his parents are like basketball stars back in the day. So he comes from an athletic family. But I think when he had conversations with some teams, they didn't get the sense that he had a true quote unquote killer instinct. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be a great player. Clearly the Patriots didn't care. But that's part of the reason that I've heard that he slipped just a little bit. But I still think he has a chance to be a really good football player. To your point, RJ, the fact that your team that is in the same division with the Patriots, and you don't love the fact that they got Christian Gonzalez, that indicates to me that you think it was a pretty good pick.
Yeah, one that definitely scared me. So on the NFC side, I think that's the one to have a little more fun with and go out with some long shotter plays, at least some moderate long shots. Only 6 teams have minus odds. We know 7 teams make the playoffs. So somebody with plus odds is making the playoffs, even if the top 6 performed to expectations. Seattle is 6th at minus 130, though. I wanted to say that building off your argument earlier, I would back them to make the playoffs, even if it's not win the division. I think minus 130 is good odds just with the state of that conference in general. They seem to me like a top 5 team in that conference. So I don't know why you would have them at minus 130. So the wild card race, though, wide open beyond whoever loses Philly, Dallas is almost certainly going to get a wild card. And so I think there's room to back a moderate plus odd underdog. I like Atlanta, like we talked about earlier. I do like Carolina, too. Also an easy projected schedule for them. And with their quarterback upgrade and Atlanta's defensive upgrades, I think those are interesting sleeper wildcard picks that even if one of them doesn't win the division, if the Saints are solid, sneak in with that 6th or 7th wildcard.
Yeah, I'm looking around here. I think you're right. I think Carolina on paper got a lot better even before they drafted Bryce Young. And I think he's going to come in and just it's not going to be seamless, but if they can keep him upright, that offensive line can hold together. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch early.
And I think both of those teams were plus 175, if I remember right, from what I saw. So I think that's just solid value to be getting in this prop where in a conference where everything's wide open.
What is the Vikings number?
The Vikings were pretty close to even, I want to say. I have to look it up, but it couldn't be more than like a plus 130.
Yeah, because people aren't really talking about them unless they're, and this I'm guilty of this as well, unless they're crapping on Kirk Cousins, who's 35, final year's deal. He's always sort of underachieved. I shouldn't say that. He gets that team to the playoffs, but in critical moments, you would like to see more sometimes. I'll put it that way. Prime time, exactly.
Plus 120 for yes.
Are we not taking this team seriously enough? I think Kevin O'Connell's a really good coach. I think they have some players. Dalvin Cook, we'll see if he stays or goes. They got Jordan Addison, who is going to be a lot of fun to watch. We didn't talk about him as a Rookie of the Year candidate on the opposite side, but there's a lot of competing interest on that team for the football. But this division is wide ass open with Aaron Rodgers gone. And while Detroit, I like. They don't have a lot of experience with winning football games over the course of an entire season. So is that Vikings, that plus number, is that a good number or no?
The issue for the Vikings, I mean, it's a solid number. Is the conference is open. I think there are going to be, like I said, underdogs that emerge here. And considering they won 13 games somehow, even if they weren't quote unquote supposed to, they give some level of accountability to them and giving them a good job
Right.
well done for that. My problem with them was how bad the defense was. It was really bad last year, and maybe you can talk to Brian Flores coming in, and does he have enough? Like I believe Vic Fangio can fix that Miami defense and make them good right away and have them competing in that division. I'm not sure what the issues that Minnesota had that Brian Flores can necessarily do that, especially when they prioritize going receiver in the first round, when I thought they definitely needed some defensive help.
Yeah, the nickname around the Fort Lauderdale offices, you probably heard it more than I did, for Ed Donatel, the former defensive coordinator, was Donna Shell, because they just ran all these shell coverages. And I know fans on Twitter would be irate with the fact that everyone was so wide ass open. Typically when teams are throwing against the Vikings. So I think Flores automatically changes that. He's a hard-nosed guy with an edge, and I think he's going to get an immediate response from his players. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to the field, but I think the demeanor and the expectation is going to be a little different. And the aggressiveness, because it didn't feel at times like that Vikings defense was playing very aggressively. They're playing more not to get beat instead of just playing with their hair on fire. And as BMAC likes to say all the time, I think he's had several coaches tell him this. I think it was his Florida State coach who's telling him, I'd rather tell you whoa than sick him. And I think that's sort of Brian Flores' mentality. Don't play scared. Just go out there and hit something. If you mess up, we'll figure it out. But don't play where you're trying to think about things and then you're half step slow and you get beat for an 80-yard touchdown.
Yeah. All right, let's look at some win totals. Who are you leaning over for, RJ?
Yeah, so typically the value on win totals is on unders, and that's because when you add up all these numbers, they get you have more wins than are available in an NFL season. So it's just if I tell you to pick a card out of a deck, but I take 2 red ones out and you leave 50 cards and say before you pick that card, you want to bet that you pick a black or red one, you're going to bet black because it's just the probability is you're going to hit it, and that's kind of what it is, betting overs versus unders. People love betting overs though, so I'm not going to detract you to not do them. I just think that the split at the end of the season is going to be 15 over, 17 unders, 14, 18, something like that, rather than an even split typically. So over teams that I think have some value, even with the lopsided board, are Kansas City over 11.5 at minus 115. Worst Mahomes season is 12-5. I just think they're giving me that division might be getting better. Sean Payton as coach and some of the things that have gone on there, but nobody's going to challenge them. And Brinson always says how much of a genius he was to back them as a division winner last year. He says that it seems like every single podcast, and it's kind of true. Like, don't bet on their downfall. They're always going to be good. So minus 115 just seems like value with them. Also like Green Bay over 7.5 at plus 110, talked about the Green Bay case earlier, and Miami over 9.5 at plus 110, getting plus odds on both those teams where I have positive expectations on them. I think is pretty solid.
All right. What about unders?
Unders, I'll likely be looking to play at some point. We'll see if there's any value on this. Is the Jets. They're 9.5 right now, but juiced heavily to the over. I think it gets to 10 at some point. And at 10, I like going under. I don't see them as an 11-win team.
I love it.
Because Aaron Rodgers upgraded quarterback, but I'm just not sure he's the guy of a few years ago. So I think there's going to be value there. I think if Detroit gets to 10, right now it's 9.5, juiced to the over. That might be an underplay because a lot of problems with their draft. A lot of people, I'm picking Jamar Gibbs with their defensive issues in the top 12, picking Jack Campbell off ball linebacker. So we'll see how good that team actually is. Of course, we know the receiver room is going to be a little barren after that news of the gambling suspensions came out. So a lot of questions to answer. And if you're going to put Detroit eventually at 10, and now you have to bet over to get to 11, you're accrediting them with a lot of success with a franchise that has trouble finding success. So I think there's going to be value there. And then Ryan's team, Chicago, it's minus 120 on the over right now. Maybe it gets to 8 and I go for under, just expecting them to be improved from last year, but not being as improved to get to a winning record from the worst team in the league.
That's a high number, 7.5. Ooh, yeah, I don't love that.
What do you feel about the Steelers winning this year? What about their win total? Does Mike Tomlin still have another winning season?
What's their number, RJ?
Their number is, I believe, 8.5, which struck me as a little high in what's going to be a pretty good division. But I don't want to bet against them with Mike Tomlin quality as a coach. Kenny Pickett probably going to be better in year 2. So I really didn't want to fade them. I kind of had struggled a little bit on what to do with them. So I'm sure Ryan will be rah back the over on them, but I'm kind of like on the fence.
Yeah, no, I think that's the play only because Mike Tomlin refuses to lose more
Lose.
games than he's won. And even last year, I was like, oh, this team 8.5 is the number -1. It's minus money. Good Lord. I don't know if they're a 9-win team on paper, but they find ways to do it. They'll probably, and Katie talked about this with the 49ers, they'll probably win 2 games in the first 2 months and then get red hot, which is always what happens. And they'll miss the playoffs and finish with 9 wins. But Kenny Pickett will be better. I'll give him credit for that. He outpaced expectations for me last year. But I think the Ravens are a team. What's the Ravens number, Billy? Because that's a team that suddenly changed the complexion of their franchise by bringing Lamar back, getting Zay Flowers. I've been saying this for a while now. Zay Flowers has some Antonio Brown in his prime to his game, and he's finally a receiver that can. It's the first time they've drafted a receiver that could do something in the first round in a very long time. And I wonder. Ooh, 9.5. That's sort of rich.
It's just to -130. And that's why the division odds are where they are, because the Bengals, I think, should be minus odds to win the division. But because the Ravens are 9.5 -130 juice on the over, they're expecting them to be a 10-win team. Then you just, that's the competition for the division. And, I'm not sure I project that. I think Cincinnati should be a pretty decent favorite to win the division.
Yeah, no, I agree
Would you lean under here at +110?
Yeah, hopefully it goes up a little more. But I think the expectations is Lamar can't stay healthy, and they've had their issues on the offensive side of the ball, developing an offense anyway. Maybe with the talent they brought in, the offensive coordinator they brought in, that's a little bit different here. But it's hard to take the under against a team where I really love the head coach and just know that they're going to get max what they can get. And if injuries work their way, the Ravens are always going to be in their mix for maybe even to make a run for the AFC Championship, just because he's that good of a coach. The problem is they just haven't been able to stay healthy the last few years. Not just Lamar, but we've seen those defensive injuries too. Remember, I think it was 2 years ago, it just seemed like every week they had a major defensive injury. And if health lines up for them at one point, maybe they go back to being the Ravens we remember.
Yeah, maybe. All right. That's going to do it for us today from Wilson, RJ, and myself. Thanks for hanging out with us. Make sure you join us next week at 1 p.m. for more off-season coverage. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube page. If you're listening to audio only, make sure you download, follow, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends to listen and watch the pod. We'll see you next week.